Welcome back to the Nitty Gritty of Real Estate podcast. Today we're talking about one of the biggest cases that upended the real estate industry to date. Let's get into it. All right, everyone. Thank you for joining us again. We are talking about the craziness that has just upended the industry. It has gone into effect, and we are seeing changes come out kind of last minute by a lot of smaller MLSs nationally, statewide. And it is basically how buyer representation and seller
disclosures
on compensation. So we have to change a lot of verbiage now. And basically this class action lawsuit by Sitzer Burnett that was allowed by the Missouri Supreme Court, and it included a lot of major brokerages.
Yeah, so it included a bunch of major brokerages, and it started a few years ago. The settlement happened April 2024.
Yeah, I believe it started. Yeah,
March, April was when the settlement was finalized. And it was essentially, they considered it an antitrust lawsuit.
Yeah. So the Sherman Antitrust Act basically said that there was too much involvement in quote unquote price fixing, right?
Correct.
And how real estate agents got paid.
Yeah. And essentially, it created, because NAR and a lot of these brokerages and a lot of the NAR affiliated MLSs created these policies or rules and practices that were adopted by most of their members. They felt like it was lessening competition amongst real estate brokers because you're putting it in the MLS and stating, hey, you're going to pay blank amount.
So just to give context to this, what we used to have was the listing agent would go in and say, we're taking X amount and we're going to share X amount with the buyer in order to bring their buyer in, sort of like a finder's fee almost.
Yeah.
And that was what was called in our industry as a co-op fee. And basically all that is going away.
Yeah, cooperative compensation is now going to be gone. And essentially, it was allowing buyers to believe that the services that were being provided by their buyer's broker or their buyer's agent was free. And because of that, it felt to some people as if it was price fixing.
Yeah. Yeah.
So.
Yeah, we're trying not to skew in any direction, whether like it's on our side being licensed agents or to the public side of things.
Yeah.
We're trying to deliver this as neutrally as possible.
Yeah, we're definitely just trying to give you kind of the facts because we do have some upcoming podcasts that are going to be talking about reasons why representation is so important, both on the seller side as well as the buyer side, not only in residential resale, which is a house that you're buying from somebody else who owns it, but also with new construction. And so we wanted to kind of give everybody, our listeners, a background of what was happening and why these changes are being made, rather than just giving you an information on why representation is so important and not giving you guys any background to it. It kind of makes it almost like we're trying to convince somebody of something, but there's reasonings by why.
Right. So, for instance, let's say I'm a brand new buyer and I want to go see a home. What are the options for me to go see a home?
Yeah. So moving forward, so essentially what it used to look like, let's go over what it used to look like, and then we'll say what it could potentially be going into. Because again, every MLS, every brokerage, everything is going to be different. It is going to be very broker specific to a point because NAR has put in some rules. So we want to just make sure that everybody understands that these rules are settled because of the settlement that was agreed upon. It was like a $1.8 billion settlement in which certain brokerages are having to pay a portion of it. NAR which is the National Association of Realtors, is going to have to pay a part of it.
Yeah.
So we are wanting to make sure that we're super black and white about the information that we're providing. So prior to August 17th, which is the date in which the settlement agreement new rules come into effect, so it's August 17th of 2024. Prior to that, a lot of buyers would be able to show a buyer a property, be available at an open house, pick up a phone call from a buyer saying, I want to look at 123 Main Street or 123 Banana Street. And they were able to just up and show in good faith with this buyer's agent that they were going to work with this buyer's agent.
Like a verbal agreement,
like
ostensibly.
a gentleman's handshake,
Yeah.
the old school agreement of I'm working with you, you're working with me, but we will need to get a paperwork in place.
Yeah.
A document called the buyer broker agreement, which is an employment agreement between the two that were working together. But it used to be able to be a gentleman's handshake. I can show you a few properties before I get a buyer broker in place with you. Make sure you like me and I like you.
Yeah.
Sort of like when you're going for a job interview and they do a working interview.
Right.
Same general idea.
Right.
It can essentially be a working interview with this buyer's agent. Moving forward, I'm going to talk about what our brokerage and what our team is requiring, which is every buyer that we show property to must sign a buyer broker exclusive agreement with us or a buyer broker showing agreement with us. Essentially, it's an agreement for compensation for showing that property.
And that compensation would be paid for by the buyer.
By the buyer.
And not out of a co-op fee that how it used to be.
How it used
right?
to be.
The listing agent is not going to pay
The listing agent will be
buyer's
collecting a fee, and then the listing agent will be paying.
Yeah.
So that's one of the big changes. And
Now, we could clarify, too, that it's not necessarily that the agent can't negotiate that compensation from the listing agent if the seller wants to provide that, right?
correct. And that's a little bit
I know,
deep.
that's a little, yeah.
We're not going to get too deep into that. But yes, there's going to be new negotiation skills
Yeah.
that are going to be needed from a lot of your real estate agents out there.
Yeah. Here's a quick opinion I want to get from you. How well do you think the real estate agents are prepared for this change just across the board? Would you say 50% are ready for this, 75% already? Less, more?
I couldn't give a number, to
Yeah.
be honest. I know that there are a lot of people that I talk to that are very prepared.
Yeah.
There are a lot of people I talk to that are prepared. Let's
Question mark.
let's just say, think about taking SATs, ACTs, one of your bigger end of school exams. You're going to have some that are prepared. You're going to have some that are not prepared. And then
Right.
you're going to have some that are kind of in the middle. They understand what's going on. They can do a little bit of fly by their pants, but because their brokerage is setting them up for success with rules and regulations, that they're able to really, truly help with that.
Yeah, yeah. Also, in your opinion, do you think this is a good change for the industry?
I believe that we have a lot of agents out there that came into the industry thinking it was going to be easy.
Yeah.
In my opinion, I like to keep the agents on the team here out of any problems. I like to understand what's going on and put backstops in place so that we don't run into any problems. I feel like, unfortunately, there are not a lot of agents that have the support that we do with understanding stuff that we are provided at our brokerage.
Yeah.
There are a lot of really great brokerages out there that are doing all the training that needs to happen. There are also some brokerages that are not. So please, as a public, make sure you are asking the questions of your real estate agent to make sure that they are making sure you are protected. Agency is another piece of this settlement that is really, really important. And I would ask your agent or an agent you're looking to work with, what does the agency look like?
Yeah.
Because there is multiple types of agency. There's seller's agency where you represent the seller. There's buyer's agency where you represent the buyer. And there's also limited dual agency in which your brokerage, because that's where your agency agreement is with. It's not specifically with one person, it is with their brokerage, where the brokerage has limited agency with both the buyer and the seller, and making sure you truly understand. And if you have questions, ask your real estate agent the questions. If I can give the public one piece of advice about anything when it comes to real estate, we would rather you ask the question and understand than assume you know the answer and say, I didn't know. We would rather you ask us 1,000 questions that clarify stuff for you.
Hey everyone, we want to interrupt this episode to let you know that we are a Keller Williams Southern Arizona franchise.
We are also realtors practicing equal housing. Now let's get you back to the podcast.
Yeah. I foresee a lot of part-time agents or agents who may take it less seriously, aren't full-time, aren't keeping up on the education portion of it. They may not be able to provide you with good answers on the value that they bring. And maybe that's a good thing for the industry, right? We have potentially more full-time agents to work with and more experienced agents in that regard. Now, hypothetical, if I were to walk into an open house, I'm unrepresented. What does that look like from the buyer's perspective?
So when an agent is holding an open house, here with our brokerage, you are only allowed to hold open houses for agents within your brokerage. Therefore, your brokerage agency is with the seller. You're representing the seller. So anybody who walks in that's a buyer could still potentially be dual agency. They could still have representation from the agent that's holding that open house or an agent on their team or an agent within that brokerage. But the second you walk into that house, unless you already have a buyer broker with the brokerage of the open house you're walking into or another agent, your agency is unrepresented, which means you are an unrepresented buyer. Anything you share at an open house could potentially be used.
It could be damaging if you choose to have representation later.
Yeah. So you got to be really, really cautious. We say that anyways when you're walking through a house with the buyers, be really cautious about what you say in the house.
Yeah. Especially with all the security and listening devices that we have these days.
Just because,
be cautious.
Again, we as agents do pride ourselves in making sure that we're keeping your confidentiality the best that we can. But at the end of the day, when you're walking into an open house, the agency is with the seller.
Yeah.
Therefore, the seller, our fiduciary rights are towards that seller.
Gotcha. And so now from the seller perspective, let's say I'm a seller looking to sign new paperwork. What does that look like on my end? Like, am I just signing like, okay, I agree to pay X percent to the listing agent, and then what else happens from beyond that?
So and because we're national and I know that everybody can hear us across the United States, I would get with your broker. If you're an agent, make sure you understand your paperwork. If you are a client, a buyer or a seller on the seller, make sure you're reading the documents that are put in front of you and understanding what's the documents say. And again, if you have questions, please ask those questions. If I can get anything across in why this NAR settlement happened, it's because somebody didn't ask the questions, I'm sure, that should have been asked, and or their representation didn't have the answers.
Right.
It's at the end of the day, my opinion on this, I'm going to say, is I'm really cautious about what I say.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah.
If I can get anything across, and I'm going to say my one opinion on this is it is somebody didn't ask the questions and somebody didn't answer the questions. There was zero clarity around something. Something was still vague in somebody's mind, which is what created confusion, and confusion creates anger sometimes. And I think that's where most of our lawsuits come in general, not just in real estate. In general, a lot of lawsuits come in when somebody was of the assumption of one thing and something else happened because clarifying questions weren't asked, knowledge wasn't had, and just make sure you understand what you're signing. With any contract, please understand what you're signing. And if you don't understand, like even if it's 4 lines that are just a little bit confusing to you, I know any professional that I surround myself with would rather you ask the question.
Yeah. If you're working with anyone that is not helping you to understand what you're signing, that's probably a red flag, and that maybe you should seek other guidance from elsewhere. So ostensibly what we're seeing happen is, and this is state by state, but the rules are being handed down from the DOJ and implemented through NAR, National Association of Realtors.
So DOJ was just opened back up into this, yes. But the National Association of Realtors, who is our guiding light when it comes to real estate rules and regs and ethics, really it's our ethics.
Yeah.
They're the ones who created the settlement, and it's a 180-page document. Within the settlement, there were promises. That's the best way I can describe it. There were promises that were made to the plaintiffs that said, because of this, we're going to put this rule in place. Because of this, we're going to put this rule in place. And those were then passed down to the real estate agents that were part of NAR and the MLSs that were part of NAR. And they said, these are the rules you have to follow.
Right.
X, Y, and Z. And it's sad. That's the only way I can say. Unfortunately, there were clients that were treated unfairly or not educated or not informed or didn't understand, and their agents didn't understand, weren't clear, and there was a miscommunication, and that miscommunication turned into this class action lawsuit that is now changing the industry from moving forward. And I don't think of it as a bad thing. I think there's going to be a lot more documentation. I think there's going to be a lot more education, and I think that's a great part of it.
Yeah.
A lot of the education and teaching people the best way to approach something makes it cleaner, and then everybody, it's fair, it becomes even more win-win. We live in a win-win world, and this becomes even more win-win. Everyone understands what they're walking into. They don't feel so slighted. They don't feel so taken advantage of. If you ever went through real estate and you ever felt taken advantage of, I want to apologize on behalf of that agent. Because at least with our team, we want our clients to feel like they're taken care of.
Right. Yeah, no, I agree with you. So just to recap, these changes are major and sweeping, especially in the realm of buyer representation.
And seller representation.
And seller representation, too. It's definitely affecting the buyer side on a bigger scale than it is the seller. It's going to be similar across the nation. However, your employment agreement will be ostensibly through a state form. And if you do need help finding someone in your area, we can help you out with that. Someone who's educated within this and who understands this and can help you understand it as well. So, don't feel like you're lost. I know this is it might be difficult to understand. There's a lot of information, and even the industry is still trying to play catch up on what's happening and these changes that have taken place. And I
feel like with any change, it's going to take some time for everyone to feel comfortable.
Yeah.
So we have to give everybody just a little bit of grace.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Heather. I know it's a lot of information here. If you have any questions on this, our info is down in the description. Reach out to us with any questions that you have. We could even make a podcast if you have something specific around it to help everyone else. Yeah. Yeah, an FAQ, exactly. And this podcast is setting up the following podcasts on how it affects individual buyers, individual sellers, and goes into a little bit more detail. So stay tuned for those. And if you found anything useful within this podcast, be sure to like us, share it with friends who might be buying or selling soon, and hopefully they can understand some of the changes that are coming across. So thank you, Heather.
Awesome.
Thank you for listening and watching the Nitty Gritty of Real Estate podcast here with the Tom J. Krieger team of Keller Williams Southern Arizona. If you are interested in buying a home, selling a home, or even investing in real estate, we have 5,000 agents across the country that we can connect you to. If you need any free resources, feel free to check out our website at www.thetjkteam.com. We hope you have a great day.